Did I answer almost?
And then come to Ali, and then Ali. Yeah, go ahead.
As historians and genealogists, we're interested not so much in ruptures but in continuities. How much do you think the very logic of state has remained intact in the post-revolutionary era? Has things really changed? And also, the way power assumes itself in relation to people vis-a-vis the economy?
Excellent questions. The only thing that I am out of my depths here. I should look to you, Dr. Tawakkoli, and elsewhere around the table to explain to me the power structure in Iran today. I'm not very familiar. I mean, I know as much as I read in the papers, but how they interface with each other and the personalities involved, I do not know. In terms of the corporate structure, certainly, even there I find a number of, I would say, significant changes. Let me give you one in my own area. If you look at the corporate structure of the Central Bank of Iran today, I haven't seen it in any other country, and I tell you I've served in many of these countries, that the President of the Republic is the chairman of the General Council. That means the shareholders' meeting in the corporate structure of the central bank. In other words, he sits and together with 4 of his ministers, they deal with the central bank as a corporate entity of the state. Now, I mentioned this to you, not that it matters that much. Perhaps in Iranian context, it makes a lot of sense, perhaps. And if you ask the governor, which I haven't, he thinks it's much better to have the president there than the Minister of Economy. I don't know enough about Iran to be able to judge that. But this is a situation that you find it certainly stands out on the world scale. Why is it needed? I don't know. If you look at the inside the central bank, there are some interesting changes from my time which I notice. They have a vice governor for parliamentary affairs and legal affairs. That's interesting. And I think in many ways it's encouraging, because accountability of a central bank to someone outside the government is very relevant to its independence. But where is the concept of independence if then in your Money and Credit Council, which is the decision-making body of the bank, you would have individuals who are, including members of parliament, for example, sitting there. Apparently they don't vote, but to me it doesn't matter that much. I don't think people count heads around the table. And you have also a shura on religious issues, so that every act of the central bank or every decision of it has to be cleared by ulamai fiqh. Okay. Now these are new features of it. And as you've seen under the previous administration, in any event, the central bank had the reputation, at least this new governor is trying to correct that, of being totally subservient to the government. Now, while I made the point that in an oil economy, fiscal policy matters, but I also in my book make a case that monetary policy still matters, but not, of course, as much. Much more on the periphery of fiscal policy. There is still a fair amount to be done, especially about supervision of banks. Right. So I don't know enough about all these relationship to be able to give you a judgment. Maybe
could you say that the central bank decision making has become more political in a sense?
Of course.
And less professional?
Less professional, I don't know, but I certainly more political.
Less autonomous as sort of entity within itself deciding autonomously.
Yep. But if you look at all you need to do, in my view, and if you did that, you will see the difference. There are some, you see, that's where I don't want to go into too much details, because I don't know the heads, I don't know the faces. But if you look at the composition of the Money and Credit Council today, and look at it under the law of 1351, you will see the difference.
But let me pose the question differently, and let's not go so much into details and take into account whether we know faces or not. You've had the experience of the pre-revolution Iran. You follow the patterns in which the Iranian economy is unfolding, although you're only limited to news sources and so on and so forth. How much of what you see makes you feel like this is pretty much the same thing that I was going after? Do you encounter that kind of feeling quite often, or are you sort of caught by...
So in a sense, a Tocquevillian observation that what is really happening in post-revolutionary period is not a radical rupture of the state and structure, but actually the continuity of it.
I see a lot of continuity in terms of narrative, vocabulary, and names. If you read the papers today in Iran, you find, certainly the technical papers, a very healthy discussion about liquidity, and people are even familiar with the concept, and whether this money is generated inside the bank or outside the bank, and the health of the banking system, non-performing loan. All those figures are there. My limitation of power of knowledge is that how is it translated into a decision at the end, which then I could compare it with my own time. To go back to my own time, I can tell you that regardless of a lot of attributes that you associate with the Shah, interestingly enough, and I've said this in my book, when it came to banking, he didn't interfere that much. He was not the arbiter of the last resort. If I had an audience and I mentioned things to him, was that make sure that he doesn't read it in the papers the following day. If he's the head of the state, you're supposed to know if you're going to increase the interest rates or not. So it was not that whether the same thing happens now, and whether how far they go up. Say, when the president is sitting in your general council, I don't know how frequently the general council meets, that's a different story. The Shah was never the head of the general council of the Central Bank of Iran.
Have you encountered moments when you would be like, damn it, if I was there, I would have told these guys how to run it. They don't know what they're doing. I'm sure it does happen.
I don't do that as a rule anyway. I mean, I often look back at my own time and say that could I have behaved differently? I'm much more judgmental about myself rather than other people.
You're not reflective at all as to what is happening in the post-revolution era?
Of course I am.
No, in the post-revolution era.
Of course I am, but I don't specifically see your question to answer it. I mean, what trends do I see in the Islamic Republic?
Let me come up with an example. We have the former head of the IAEA, I forgot his name. He's quite reflective on the current situation, and he's out there in the media talking.
Do you mean Mr. Pesaran?
No. It's
Mohammed or something?
no, the Iranian. He was here.
Why would I say IAEA? The head of Iranian.
He was the founder of the Iranian atomic.
Oh, Mr. Akbari Etemad.
So basically, what he's doing, he's going back and forth in his time and the current condition, doing all kinds of comparisons, helping policy analysts of course, in the public sphere and so on and so forth. Or we had someone like Mousavian, the former Iran negotiator.